Hello again. This recording is primarily for those of you who might be interested in doing the Benazir Bhutto and terrorism essay. She wanted, remember that the prompt is about whether she's right, whether the West is at least partially responsible for, in its support of dictators, for the rise of terrorism in the Middle East. Okay, and so what I thought I would do to make it somewhat easier for you to grasp, you're not supposed to become Middle East diplomats right now. I mean, you're not supposed to be completely knowledgeable about politics. But one way to approach this and to figure out how you can find something to say is to look at someone else's essay. And here's someone else's essay. I'm not sure if it's the same one that I put on the announcement board, but it was a good one. Now, this student only used 4 sources, and 2 of them were the ones that I provided. So she had 2 more. I would say that when you're approaching either one of these prompts, use the article in the world of ideas extensively. In other words, get a marker or write down the quotes that you want to think about and decide whether you want to know more about them and whether you want to prove they're true or not. In this particular one, this student, you can see at the very bottom, used not EBSCOhost or ProQuest. She used JSTOR, and she found 2 really good articles. Okay, I'm going to go back up again and just read a little bit. If you want me to email it to you, just say the word. I'm very happy to help you look at it. So here's how she went. And this sounds like she found some good ideas from her original brainstorm. When an area is devastated by oppression, war quickly follows, accompanied by the sound of bombs going off amidst chaos and ruin. Such is an area devastated by war and oppression. Such is the Middle East because of a destabilization carried out by the West. Amongst the chaos and ruin are citizens that are misunderstood, misrepresented, and taken advantage of under the mask of words such as freedom, democracy, and good governance. Under this guise are dictators and their governments installed in the Middle East to advance the West's political agenda. The promise of democracy has only an empty offer to the Middle East, with no real intention of allowing such a thing to happen. The democracies would fail because of institutionalized ignorance, meaning that in unfree societies, education is not promoted. That has been spread on both sides of the spectrum. Ignorance to believe that Islam and democracies do not go hand in hand, and she should have added, and ignorance among the Muslims who think that whatever, fill in the blank. Benazir Bhutto, a Pakistani politician, believed differently, and she wanted the world to know and understand that Islam and democracy can work well together. But Bhutto believed that Islam and democracy can go hand in hand, and she uses the Holy Quran to show how a lot of verses do support the idea of democracy. Basically, any one of you who has gone through what I've given you so far of Benazir Bhutto, her work, and the video would be able to say those things. You could come up with those ideas. Now, you might not be in agreement with them, but if you were in agreement, then I don't think it's beyond any of you. After the Cold War, Bhutto became the first female prime minister of Pakistan and was a woman who fought for democracy and the rights it guarantees, rights that are also found in the Holy Quran. She was a person of great influence and was loved by all those who encountered her, whether it be world leaders, politicians, or even civilians. As Bhutto described in Islam and Democracy, she says that it's because of this ignorance that people believe that Islam and democracy cannot go hand in hand. Okay, so she finished her first thought. The West has created this fallacy only to install their governments to control the resources in the region, without much care for the democracies they say they are going to install. The West, generally understood to be the superpowers of the world, with the USA and Europe in the fore, has forced itself into the Middle East through unfulfilled promises, and it has left the Middle East in ruins and chaos because of the West's need to control resources. Western control has been attempted through a large military force deployed over many decades, a force that believes it is enforcing democracy and that through the carnage it brings has given rise to an opposing fundamentalist movement that also spreads destruction through the Middle East, where there is no longer any strong political force such as Benazir Bhutto to differentiate truth from falsehood. That was a long first paragraph, but it worked. I understood what she said, even though there were some grammatical mistakes. I don't care that much if you make some grammatical mistakes if you have a strong argument. I am more interested in your ideas. You could say the complete opposite to what this student said and still have an A. Okay. And then what she does, one of you asked, how do I develop this? Well, for instance, this next paragraph, which is called a body paragraph, you could do things with your body paragraphs that demonstrate what question you're answering. So, for instance, in this first one, she's explaining why the United States wanted access to the resources of the Middle East. And during the Iran-Iraq War in 1982, there was a perfect opportunity to weaken two of the stronger countries in the region, thus advancing the West's political agenda. It's true, we wanted oil. Oil is energy. It's an energy source, and they've had a lot of it. So we wanted access to it. It would be pretty hard to undermine that argument, although we have tried to say that, we wanted to establish democracy. But it doesn't even make sense that we want to establish democracy as much as we want to make sure that some other country doesn't get in there, like Russia. Some other strong power doesn't get in there and control the resources and become more powerful than we are. So this whole paragraph is pretty much why, with some examples. Here we go. During the end of the Cold War, Afghanistan had beaten Russia and pushed the Russian army back, and we were helping Afghanistan. With Russia out of the Middle East and a weakened Afghanistan, Iraq, and Iran, the United States would be the only superpower in the region, which sets countries up to install their own governments. The events of September 11th in the USA gave unprecedented leverage to the USA to make demands and enforce a dependent structure on the Middle East. And she did not go on, I don't think she went on to completely explain that. Oh no, she does have a quote, a very long quote, as a matter of fact. And this is how you insert a longer quote. You indent it, and there's no quotation marks around it. You just put your source, the name of the author, and the page number, if there is a page number. If there isn't, then you just put the author. Okay, and finishing this first body paragraph, she says, Western forces met with some resistance as they tried to establish themselves in the West. The former freedom fighters labeled Mujahideen when fighting against Russia had now been labeled terrorists because they revolted against the West's presence in the Middle East. Any resistance that met with United States establishment was mislabeled and held back. And that's common. That's in the military. Some of you are in the military, and you know that in order to kill other human beings, we give them labels like ragheads. That's what we call Muslims and Arabs. We call them ragheads so that we can kill them. And that makes it easier for the personnel in the military to not feel emotional about what they're doing. I know some of you have served. I am indebted to you. I respect our service people, and I realize that being in the service sometimes wreaks too much havoc upon your own soul, and it might not be the outcome that you would hope for it to be. That's because you encounter all kinds of people everywhere. So I love getting the experience from those of you who have some knowledge. You can use first person, you can talk about what you've endured, and put that in your papers. All right, and going down to the bottom, because I don't want to make this too long. It's already almost 10 minutes. So you see the first source is Benazir Bhutto. The third one is the series of videos. The second and the fourth ones were from JSTOR. Okay, I'm going to click this down and go to, I found a couple of articles today I found in JSTOR, I think this is, oh, it's a different one. It looks like it's a political search engine. So if you're here, JSTOR is right there. Do you see it? So this is one way to go find articles. This is another way, and here's a third. It looks like it's a good one. I don't know if it will work well for the Mexican-American War, but it's worth a try. I found this one from JSTOR, which is about the U.S. Greater Middle East Initiative, and he has a paragraph right in the first page. Most of the West, I'm reading it to you, most of the West, especially the United States, considers that autocratic rule is the root cause of evils, such as the lack of, where's the next page? The lack of education, political institutions, economic development, and most importantly, empowerment of women. Well, if the West really believes that, which is what he says, and he's got he might be, I don't know, Ukrainian or Russian, or, I mean, he's obviously an English writer, so, you know, he might just have an ethnic name, but that's what they call these peer-reviewed articles. These are stronger, much stronger than anything you're going to get in Wikipedia, which is a hodgepodge of information taken from peer-reviewed articles. You could use something like that. Most of the West, especially the United States, what I just read, considers that autocratic rule, like the rulers of Saudi Arabia, like the Shah of Iran, who we used to support, are the reason for the lack of rights. And you can understand how the lack of rights would make people angry at the West, angry that we support the power structures that are autocratic and oppressive. You can still argue the opposite, and honestly, if you do a good job, if you support your argument, and I will help you support your argument, no matter which way you want to go. That's my job. All I want to do is make sure you have a strong essay. So you could start out with things that you know. I found, hold on, here's another one. I found this in EBSCOhost. Yes, EBSCOhost. Is democracy the answer to end terrorism? This one went the opposite way, but it was a little more difficult to understand. And I don't really recommend using articles that have difficult wording. So I would have jettisoned that, and I would have gone on to the next one. This one was also from EBSCOhost. It's called Caught by Surprise, period. Again, period. Now, Fareed Zakaria, the author, is quite famous, and he appears on the TV all the time. And the article is very easy to read. So he talks about in the late 1970s, American officials were aware that the Shah of Iran was losing domestic support. They analyzed alternate scenarios and studied various opposition groups. They thought they were being very bold in their outreach, talking to Marxists, dissidents, and other radicals. But they paid little attention to the turban-clad clerics preaching dissent via mosque, audio tape, and pamphlet. How many people could possibly support mullahs, the mutawwi, the fundamentalists, promising a return to theocracy in the late 20th century? That's the rule of religion. 30 years later, we're still surprised and still asking the same questions. How could the Palestinians vote for a party that wants to create an Islamic state? And this article is interesting because he says something here that says that all fundamentalist groups pretty much are grown the same way. He writes, the story of the rise of Hamas mirrors the rise of almost all such Islamic political parties in the Middle East. And so he talks about Hamas predominantly. And I thought that was also a strong article. It's not very long. It ends here. Okay, and then one last thing I was going to point out. There are documentaries. Some are more credible than others, and I have to stop. Okay, so I will stop, and I will talk to you later.